Today I want to talk about the music that I've listened to over my 40-something years on the earth and talk about some of the music that's changed the way I try to write music and the way that I want to write music versus music that I've just kind of gotten interested in or gotten stuck on and listened to, but it hasn't really impacted me in the same way. So let's talk about that. So as a young man, one of the first musical artists I remember listening to regularly and quite faithfully was Michael W. Smith. I grew up in church and had access to some of his music, and I was just hooked as soon as I heard it. It was all I wanted to listen to, and really all I did listen to for the next 7 or 8 years of my life, with very little deviation from that. We didn't listen to a lot of radio in the house, especially mainstream. Listened to some oldies, a few things like that, but usually we were listening to a tape or a CD of something. And so that was kind of the pattern for me growing up, as I would kind of get stuck on one thing or one person and ride that for a long time until the appeal wore off or the novelty faded, I guess is the right way to put it. I remember in my early 20s, I went through a few different phases. So again, growing up on Michael W. Smith, that's the kind of music I wanted to write. I wanted to write this, adult pop, if you want to call it that. I don't even know if there's a category for that anymore. But that's kind of what it was, adult contemporary back then. And that's the kind of music I wanted to write. And so I did. The instruments that I tried to get or the sounds I tried to create were all based on trying to recreate his sound. Then as I got into my early 20s, I played a little more acoustic guitar over the years and kind of got stuck into Willie Nelson for a few years and really enjoyed that. And Willie Nelson was the first time that I started listening to someone else who made me think maybe I could write a little different style than I've been writing all this time. And so I made an effort to try to write some more of the old country kind of style. I was listening to his older stuff, like 70s, 80s, and really enjoyed it. Stuck around with him for a few years, and then kind of transitioned out into the world of Elton John. And I'm trying to remember now what it was. I got the Elton John Big Picture CD the year it came out. I got it for Christmas and loved it. It was my first venture into just wide mainstream secular music, which I hadn't been exposed a lot to growing up. And I really, really latched onto that album. And again, that was probably my late teens. And then, then the Willie Nelson phase came in, and then I can't remember what the event was that caused it, but for some reason I picked up an old Elton John, the Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy album, which I loved. Then I found out probably a year after I got that album that he had made a follow-up, I guess, called The Captain and the Kid. So I picked that up, and then I just kind of dove headlong into his music. And it was music that I just really enjoyed, but it wasn't music that made me try to change the way I was going to write. I was still, writing in that Michael W. Smith style. I was using more acoustic guitar than I had in the past, but Elton John, the music was really enjoyable to me. I felt like it was way over my head. I was never going to be able to write like that, and I didn't even try. The next musical phase for me was probably the Avett Brothers, and that was more back towards the acoustic side. The Second Gleam was the first exposure I had to them. Just a fantastic EP. If you haven't heard that, please go listen to it. Not long after I got that, they released I and Love and You, which is also a great album, followed up by The Carpenter, which is my favorite album of theirs of all time. It's magnificent. But I hung around them for a few years and learned some things from their music. I didn't try to transition into any of their kind of style, but I learned some things, especially their earlier work wasn't super clean, super polished, but man, it was just so good. I mean, the talent level was spectacular, and that came through. Like, the production quality wasn't there in their earlier days. They probably didn't have this big budget and all this money to go spend in a studio. But that really early music of theirs, it has a real charm to it. And I found that once The Carpenter came out, and then the next couple of albums, their sound changed so much because of the budgets and the production that they had access to at that point. But the thing I love about them is I think they probably could play any one of their songs with just the two guys playing on a banjo and an acoustic guitar. You can tell the root of what they do is still there, despite the layers of production that are on top of it now. So that's what I learned from them. Just, writing a good song is writing a good song, no matter what what's around it. What level of production's around it. So I learned that from listening to the Avett Brothers. And really, that was kind of the end of my phases of music, I guess. I started following NPR's Tiny Desk concert series and stumbled onto some fantastic artists there. I'm thinking of John Prine in particular. I did not know who John Prine was before I saw the NPR Tiny Desk, and that music, again, is not music that I can emulate, but it's in its own league. I mean, the lyric writing is just so stinking clever. I never heard anything like it. I really haven't heard anything else like it. He was so good at telling a story, and I just love his stuff. I also got exposed to Future Islands, and those guys really pushed me. I was starting to get this sense of being interested in synthesizers quite a bit more around the time I stumbled upon Future Islands, and they really gave me a push into that world of electronic music that I've always thought was just, dance club music that I had really no interest in. But seeing the way that you could utilize the synthesizers like they do to make this soundscape, really appreciated that, and they are one of the bands that made me want to change the way I write, and I think it is really coming through in the music that I'm writing now. In particular, I'll have an album coming out in December, and I'm super excited about the way that album has come together and the way the songs have been put together. I feel like a lot of that influence has taken hold. Ironically, about the same time, I hadn't bought any Michael W. Smith's music in years, just because the direction that he went with some of his music wasn't really the way I was, or wasn't what I was interested in continuing to listen to at the time. So, but kind of on a whim, I picked up his Million Lights album a couple of years ago, about the same time I found Future Islands, and it is full of synthesizers. It's a really cool album, and it kind of reconnected me to Michael W. Smith's music, and it also reinforced that direction I wanted to go with my synthesizer music. So there have been several other Tiny Desk concerts that have been very influential, and I wish I could think of all of the different artists that I've bought music from. Arthur Moon is another good one, another electronic music group. Definitely worth checking them out. But earlier this year, I think in July, I've been aware of Nick Cave for years. Thought it would be cool to be a Nick Cave fan. Tried, never really could latch onto his music. The most exposure I had to him was when he and Warren Ellis did the soundtrack to the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, which is one of my favorite movies. And in no small part due to the fact that it has such an amazing soundtrack. But those guys did the soundtrack for it, and that's kind of been my limited exposure to Nick Cave. On a whim this summer, I started listening to the Ghost Teen album. Please go listen to that if you haven't heard it. But as far as milestone albums in my life and changing or making me want to change and get better at what I'm doing, the Ghost Teen album did the trick. Nick Cave he's in a league of his own also, a different kind of league from John Prine. But he is such a presence if you watch him perform live. But I think there must just be something really, really special either about Warren Ellis in particular or just the combination of Warren Ellis and Nick Cave. There's a magic in that recipe that is unlike anything I've come across. And that music, I listened to that Ghost Teen album, and it's a long album. I think it's like an hour and 5 minutes or something. It's got 2 tracks the last track's like 14 minutes long. There's another one that's like 12 minutes. It is a long album, but I listened to it, I think, every day for at least a month and sometimes multiple times in a day. But that music has been so impactful to me. And so I really don't have an end game, as far as where this video is going, but I just wanted to talk about, again, I've kind of gone back through the list, Michael W. Smith, Willie Nelson, Elton John, the Avett Brothers, and then got into some, various stuff like John Prine, Future Islands. Man, there's a big one I'm missing that I picked up from the NPR Tiny Desk series, and I can't think of who it is. At any rate, there have been so many, but Michael W. Smith and Future Islands, and now this Nick Cave album, and it's not like any of the rest of his albums. It's definitely different, but those things have been life-changing for me in terms of my musical life and what I want to set out to do. Those are milestones or heights that I don't feel like I'll ever reach, but there's something to work towards. So if you've stuck around this far into the video, first of all, thanks for listening to this rambling. But secondly, if you can, go listen to the Ghost Teen album. In particular, listen to the Hollywood track. And if you don't have access to the Ghost Teen album, I'll try to put a link to it. There's a video where they play the song Hollywood live. And you can go listen to that. But Warren Ellis has such an amazing synthesizer sound. It's perfect. And it's interesting because he's playing on a Yamaha Reface DX. But it sounds like an analog synth, what he's doing with it anyway. So I have been messing around on my Korg Prologue and I feel like I've almost nailed that sound that he's got going. So I'm going to play a little bit of that right here at the end. So go listen to Hollywood from Ghost Teen. Listen to this demonstration and see if you think it's close. How could it be better? But then again, if you've stuck around this long, I'd be interested to know what music has changed your writing direction. Like, what have you heard? What have you come across over the years that you've thought, man, I got to do that, or I've got to get closer to that. That's the direction I want to go. Thank you, so-and-so, for pointing me in the right direction. Who's that been in your life? I'd love to hear about that in the comments. Thanks again for sticking around. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content on my channel. Stick around for the sample. It's coming up next. Thanks.